The last thing we're going to take a look at in this section before tying everything together is the idea of an array. An array is a data structure in computer programming that basically says that you can store a number of elements inside of a list. And it's sort of like a row vector, except that we're just going to access singular elements of that row vector. So essentially it looks something like this. So we just have the element, and in MATLAB, indexes start at 1. So let's say this was variable x, and x contained this list, and it just had 5 items. What you can say is that index of 2 of x stores the value 21. Index 3 of x stores the value -20. And so it's very much like a row vector, except we're just going to be accessing singular elements. We could also have multi-dimensional arrays. So if we use a semicolon while we're defining a variable x, that means we're jumping down to a new row. So essentially, if you think of it like a matrix, if you've taken linear algebra or some basic matrix theory, then this would just be your next row in your matrix. So it's not too difficult to try to work with arrays. And let me just show you some really basic programming examples of this. So I'm going to define a variable x, and let's say x is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's say it's equal to Chris. Right? So now we just have a string there, and we have Jones likes, and let's say math. And I'm going to change these numbers just thinking about it, because 1, 2, 3, 4 might be too generic. So let's try 55, -75, 101, and let's just say pi. All right. Now, if I say x comma 1 comma 2, what that means is I'm going to look at the first row, element 2, which is 75, -75. So let's go ahead and run this. Right? And it says they're not consistent. I'm not sure what's going on with that. So maybe we can get rid of this. Let's just try numbers. So let's try 5, 7, 8, 9. And let's run it again. All right, and there it goes. Okay, so it just didn't like the words that I had in there instead. Not sure why, but maybe I needed a comma in there. That's fine. If I said x of, let's say, row 2, element 4, then that would go into this row and pull out the 4th element, which in this case is 9. Right? So now we have -75 and 9. If I want to access all elements in a particular row, I'm going to use a semicolon. So this is going to go down to the 2nd row. And now notice what it does is it just prints out all of the elements in that row. If I want to print out all the elements in a specific column, like let's say column 4, I would just say :4. And notice the 2 numbers in column 4 should be pi and 9. Right, so here's pi, here's 9. It flips it over to the format of the decimal type just because of the pi is irrational, so it does floating point instead. If I want to know the size of the matrix, I could do size x. And I'm going to get rid of this. And what that does is it tells me that matrix X is going to be 2, 4. So that means it's 2 rows, 4 columns. Right? If I want to try to access the actual number, so maybe I just want to figure out how many rows there are in this thing, then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say size x comma 1. So that's going to be the first element. So I'm going to say size x comma 1, and that should just be 2, which it is. And then size x comma 2 is going to tell us 4, which means that there's 4 columns. All right. And of course, we could assign this to a variable. So I could say rows is going to be equal to size 1, and then columns is going to be equal to size x comma 2. And I'll unsuppress those. So now we have them assigned to variables. And later in the course, that's going to be helpful for us when we start dealing with matrices and being able to utilize numerical methods to be able to solve systems numerically as opposed to analytically. So That's all that we wanted to look at with arrays, just learning how we can access them and try to work with them, and put and extract the sorts of elements that fall within the arrays. So our last video that we're going to look at in this section, we're just going to go through and kind of tie everything together into one last example that works with control structures and then also works with error handling, as well as some of the things that we've looked at earlier in the course.